and welcome to Canadian Crazies, the show that explores the lives of seemingly normal Canadians pushed over the edge. My name is Carleen Young, your host, and in this special 50th anniversary of Canadian Crazies, we will be revisiting the case of Mary Dempster, a seemingly normal wife of a Baptist parson who went simple after one mysterious incident that led to the premature birth of her son, Paul. What caused this woman to go so crazy? Why is she like this? Canadian Crazy investigated right before World War I after the initial incident. Now, almost 50 years after this, we are revisiting the case and speaking to several villagers who stayed in contact with Mary Dempster and seeing the impact her life had on them. First, we will be showing you original footage from before World War I, and then we will be visiting a few of the villagers beforehand. Stay tuned for more on this intriguing case in Canadian Crazies.
After speaking to several villagers, Canadian Crazies has compiled this dramatic reenactment of how Mary Dempster may have gone simple. Was this the incident that made Mary Dempster crazy?
My dear wife, she was so lovely when we first met, so pious, so kind, but no man's life is perfect. She was too emotional, especially after the snowball incident and Paul's birth. This is a terrible thing to say, but perhaps everything would have been easier had she just died that night. She nearly did. I would have kept my job. I would have missed seeing her decline.
I would describe Mary as a kind and caring person. I've been able to receive love and affection from her. I feel like I am emotionally attached to her because of the incident in which Percy Staunton threw that snowball. If I did not duck in front of Mary Dempster when this incident happened, I would not feel as guilty as I do now.
What snowball? I didn't throw a snowball.
Still feeling this guilt now because I feel that because I ducked in front of the snowball that was originally meant for me, I am totally responsible for causing Mary to give birth to Paul a few months too early, and for her voyage into simplicity. I feel that this sense of guilt is robbing me of my sense of humanity, because I have let it control my life. I feel that I am obliged to do everything I can for Mary, such as cutting and piling wood, and cutting the grass. Percy Staunton, the person who originally threw the snowball, is not feeling any guilt at all, and he is denying that he is actually responsible. If it were known that Percy threw that snowball in the first place, he would be in big trouble.
Did you put a rock in that snowball?
No, I would never put a rock in a snowball.
After that point, Mary had taken to wandering. I figured nothing was wrong with her. I didn't understand the extreme of her illness until she hadn't come home at her normal time that night. I sent everyone out looking for her. It was that young Ramsey kid that found her. It was horrible. Do you know anything about the tramp incident?
I don't know much about it. All I know is that lady's insane.
Mark my words, a piece of the devil entered her when that snowball hit her. I didn't realize how crazy she had become until that tramp incident.
What about Paul? Mary Dempster's young boy must be receiving much trouble.
Do you know anything about the birth of Paul?
Oh yeah, Paul. He's the son of that crazy lady.
How did the tramp incident affect your son, Paul?
I was tough on Paul. I told him that he had to be nice to his mother because it was his birth that sent her over the edge. I think he started to resent her and me.
There you have it. Since these interviews took place, Mary Dempster's life took an even more unfortunate turn for the worse. After the incident in the gravel pit with the unknown tramp, she became a social outcast. Many members of the seemingly welcoming village of Deptford turned on her and made Mary's life a living nightmare. Amasa, the Baptist husband, seemingly loving, yet obviously betrayed, made Mary an inmate in her own home. Mary was unable to leave her kitchen. Eventually, her child Paul ran away to join the circus, trying to escape the confines of Deptford. After this happened, Mary was thrown into a fit of rage, and eventually her kindly rich aunt, Miss Bertha Shanklin, took her to Weston, Ontario, where she lived until the recession of 1929. After the death of Bertha Shanklin, Dunstable Ramsay, the young boy we saw earlier, was charged with the duty of caring for feeble-minded Mary 30 years until her death in 1959. Canadian Crazies has managed to catch up with 3 citizens who were in Deptford. Paul, Dunstable Ramsay, now known as Dunstan Ramsay, and Percy Boyd Staunton, now known as the wonderful CEO of Alpha Sugars. He now goes by Boyd Staunton. Canadian Crazies was also able to reconnect with Joel Sturgeoner, the once unknown tramp who made Mary Dempster's life turn for the worst.
Dunstan Ramsay is now an esteemed author of several books on saints, the recipient of the Victoria Cross from World War I, and assistant headmaster of history at the Colborne Boys College in Toronto.
The last time I saw Mary alive was in March, in the last hours before she passed away. She was in the infirmary of a mental hospital in a small town. I sat with her for about an hour holding her hand, and the last thing she ever did was give my hand a slight tug. Unfortunately, she died about a half an hour later. I arranged to have her body shipped to Toronto to be cremated. I kept her ashes in my room at the Colborne College, the boys' school that I have been teaching at since I was 26 years old.
How do you remember Mary?
I remember her as a saint. I believe that Mary performed 3 miracles in her lifetime. She saved a tramp named Joel Sturgeoner from himself in 1913.
Joel Sturgeoner, the once infamous tramp, is now the director of Lifeline Mission in Toronto. He insists God's grace fell onto him because of Mary Dempster.
How do you think you affected Mary Dempster's life?
I don't think I even affected her that much. She is a saint, and she will always be on the path to righteousness.
What were you thinking before the incident?
Well, the Lord just guided me to her. The Lord just let it be so, for whatever happened.
Sure. How do you feel about the gravel pit incident now?
I wouldn't change anything. I believe that God brought us together for a higher purpose.
And do you think that Miss Dempster is crazy now, as a result?
Of course she's not crazy. She is a saint and a gift from God.
I've thought of her as a full saint, which was defined by Father Regan as somebody who seems to be full of holiness and loves everybody and does every good act he can. But because he's a fool, it all comes to nothing, to worse than nothing, because it is virtue tainted with madness, and you can't tell where it will end up.
How has Mary Dempster affected your life?
Before I met Mary Dempster, my life was being dominated by other men. I had to submit to the other tramps or I wouldn't be able to eat. I was forced to do horrible, sinful things. Mary Dempster was God's hand guiding me to the light. She taught me the beauty of human form and the beauty of human life. Since our encounter, I have discovered the Lord's righteousness and my higher calling. I am bent on sharing the Lord's message to all those who pass through Lifeline Mission and all those who I encounter in my life. That is how she impacted me.
Joel Sturgeoner feels quite obviously indebted to Mary. Percy Boyd Staunton, now known as Boy Staunton, on the other hand.
Do you remember anything of Mrs. Dempster?
Mrs. Dempster? I haven't been since Deptford for 20 years. I don't even know who that is.
Do you remember her son Paul? You must remember Paul.
Who?
The premature baby? You don't remember him?
Paul. Never heard of him.
You are now a businessman. Do you think that Deptford helped in that regard?
It didn't help me at all. I'm glad I don't live there anymore. I mean, I moved on to bigger and better things in the world. I even knew King Edward VIII before his unfortunate abdication.
Mary was institutionalized. Did you know that? It was your friend Ramsay who put her in the institution before she died.
No, Dunny never mentioned her. Poor guy was always secretive.
And the snowball. You threw a snowball in your youth. Do you remember that?
I don't recall it at all.
Extensive research by the Canadian Crazies team has led us to Paul, now known as Sweden's Magnus Isengrim.
If she died today, I wouldn't care. I haven't seen either of my parents since I left Deptford. Now that I am Magnus Isengrim, I have shed all my ties with all that and all the trauma. I am now a man of mystery. My life is now a mystery.
You said that if she died, you wouldn't care. She has in fact died, and her funeral was quite the lonesome affair.
That is no matter to me.
When was the last time you saw your mother? Why haven't you attempted to rekindle some sort of relationship with her?
As I said, when I shed my identity of Paul Dempster, I also shed my connections with my family. Isengrim is from Sweden. I don't know of many Dempsters, for as I am concerned, she is just another Canadian mental patient.
Mystery! It has been 50 years since Mary Dempster has been deemed a Canadian crazy. Her life has perhaps impacted this man most of all.
I believe that my emotional obsession with Mary Dempster, as well as my weak ability to emotionally connect with other people, has helped me to become the man that I am today.
Thank you for joining us on this week's special 50th anniversary episode of Canadian Crazies. This was the life of Mary Dempster. Was she a saint or just some other insane Canadian woman? You decide, as you've seen the impact this woman has had on 4 prominent Canadian citizens. Until next week, my name is Carleen Young.
After that point, Mary had taken to wandering. I still gotta remember.
Headshot.
Look like Jesus.
I am Jesus.